Hello and welcome to another session of the Sqoop series. So we have seen many options how we can import this data. We can import the whole data. We can import portion of the data based on some conditions. We can use a where clause, a free-form query. We can select the few columns. We know how to handle the null data. We have exported the data. We have created the staging table. We have cleared the staging table. We have learned a lot, right? Now let's look at some of the performance tuning techniques that we can use. So we'll divide this into import statements and export. So for imports, we use mappers, right? So if you use one mapper, one thread will be created. It has to do all the job by itself. So use more mappers wherever possible so that the data will be split across multiple mappers and then your job will be executed rather faster. But make sure that your database is able to accept those mappers, because we have discussed this again, we have discussed this previously. So if your database can only give you let's say n number of calls, right? Make sure that you do not exceed that numbers, because also make sure that you are aware of all the other jobs that are calling this database, because they might end up taking more resources, and your database may not have that number of calls or resources for you to call, and thereby you may actually put in 8 mappers, but then your database might just have like four resources available, and that will basically cause your job to fail. So use caution. Make sure that you give the appropriate number of mappers, right? That is one. And the second thing we can do is we can give a direct option. Now this is again we have discussed in one of our series. So basically some databases will have the native drivers, like for MySQL you have a native driver. In Sqoop the Oracle will have its own native driver, right? So if a Sqoop provides you a native driver, it is better to use, you can use that direct option. So when you give the direct option, Sqoop will use the native drivers to connect to the database rather than the third party JDBC. So this will have a little bit of impact in the performance. Now we have been using the JDBC drivers because in my course I'm using MySQL, but then you may also have to use some other database like Oracle, Teradata, whatever it is. So those drivers may not be available in Sqoop. Sqoop may not support those native drivers. So in that case you will anyway have to use the JDBC. So it is better that we practice in that way, so that we practice for all the databases. If you know that particular database has the native drivers associated, then you can use direct option. Other thing option you can say is you can use the fetch size. When you import the data, by default Sqoop will import 1000 rows at a time, right? You can increase this size, 2000, 3000, to make sure that you import more data at a time. At the same time, make sure that you have sufficient memory, because if you don't want to import too much of data that your memory cannot handle. So these are some of the performance tuning techniques that you can try. Again, it all depends upon the number of resources available, the memory that is available. So performance tuning is always trial and error, guys. So in one project your 4 mappers may work, in some other project you can go up to 16 mappers as well. So make sure that you are aware of the jobs, you are aware of the memory, you are aware of other things. And again, this is basically trial and error. So you try based on the ideal situation, and whatever works for you, make the necessary changes. Now Sqoop tuning for export. So when you do an export, the data from HDFS will be inserted into your MySQL database or any traditional database. So by default, Sqoop can export 10,000 rows at a time. In one single way, it can basically take 10,000 records. Now you can increase this, you can make changes to this property by using this below two properties. One is Sqoop export statement per transaction. The other is Sqoop export records per statement. Now Sqoop export records per statement. This means how many rows are inserted per insert statement. So here we are saying is 100 records, right? So this basically means 100 rows per SQL statement are inserted. The other thing is Sqoop export statements per transaction. Now this property will tell you how many insert statements are fired. So if you are saying that you are saying 100 statements, so basically here we are saying we are firing 100 statements. So we are firing 100 insert statements. Each insert statement is going to fetch 100 records at a time. So in a way, if you look at this, you have 100 insert statements. Each insert statement will insert 100 records. So 100 into 100, 10,000. So 10,000 records per Sqoop statement. So that is what the default behavior of Sqoop. So you can increase this, you can make it maybe 200, 300, whatever it is. So that way you are in for one Sqoop statement, you are inserting more than 10,000 records. So that is one of the performance tuning techniques that we can do. Okay, so these are very simple performance tuning techniques. I hope this was helpful to you guys, and I'll see you guys in my next class.